Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Caleb Saucer, and I serve as the Director of Sales and Marketing for the Pentecostal Publishing House. Tonight, I'm honored to be joined by one of my good friends, Pastor Donny Willis, to talk about his new book entitled Good, Butter, Best. Now, while we give just a second for people to jump on and to tune in, I know some will be watching this later. I do want to take a moment just to introduce Donny for those who may not be familiar with him. By his own admission, Donny describes himself as an adventurer. He tells the story of being a child growing up in Louisiana and from that early stage of his life being adventurous, being willing to swim in those murky waters and rivers of Louisiana. It's that adventurous spirit that's paved the way for many journeys, such as a 1,300-mile trek to pastor in Westchester, New York. He has seen the launch of a second church campus in downtown Manhattan. He's taught both at the same time courses to pre-K students through fifth grade students, all while also teaching college courses. Donny will admit to you that his desire is to wholeheartedly live his life to make everybody around him better. And he believes that life should be spent, not wasted. It should be invested in other people. Donny is married to his wife, Ashley. They have 3 kids. They make up what they call the ABCDE Club: Ashley, Braden, Claire, Donny, and Elliot. And we are honored to have him as our special guest tonight for this author interview series. So Donny, we're going to go ahead and just jump straight in. I'm thinking back to November of 2019, and for years I have enjoyed the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And so I'm thinking about sitting there with my family. We know that the festivities are coming later. The turkey's gonna come. I can smell that cooking in the kitchen and all the preparation that's gone in there. And I had kind of just viewed on and off the Macy's parade that day, but I jumped on social media, and all of a sudden my social media feed was swarmed with these pictures of you dressed in this giant butter suit, running down just the streets of New York with this interaction with Al Roker. Lo and behold, you became an overnight social media sensation. I know that for those who are tuning in, really kind of a good place for us to start is tell us the story. Tell us what happened that brought you to the point of wearing a giant butter costume, being on national television, interaction with Al Roker, ultimately leading to the book that we're going to talk about today. But fill us in on some of that backstory, some things that other people may not have heard that brought you to that point.
Absolutely. Well, Caleb, first of all, thank you so much for everything that you have done, helping Good Butter Best come to pass. You have believed in the book just as much as I have, and you've been there with me every step of the way through the process. And so thank you so much to you and to PPH for just really making this happen. And it has been fun. Writing the book and the process of the book has just been just as much fun as the story, the butter story. So back in 2019, it began obviously before the before the parade, but I got the opportunity from a good friend to be in the parade. I was not looking for myself, to be honest with you, Caleb. I was actually asking for someone else who wanted to be in the parade, and went up to my connection at Macy's, who is absolutely amazing, a great friend of mine. And I was like, hey, I've got a friend who wants to be in the parade. Feel free to say no. It's okay to say no. And they were like, oh yeah, that would be great. And you too. And I was like, no, not me, them. I'm just trying to, be a good friend. And through it all, I show up Thanksgiving morning. Me and Ashley had already had this discussion. We're not really going to tell people. We're not going to tell people what I'm doing, because the last thing that I want is the image of me being in a stick of butter to be my image. And if you hear me coughing out there, everybody, don't worry, I don't have COVID. I've got bronchitis because I have terrible sinuses. So don't be trying to figure out does he have COVID? The answer is no, I got bronchitis. But so this is so 2019 was the butter year. I show up at the hotel, and they're putting me in this butter costume. It's about 5 o'clock in the morning. I go to where the costumes are. I get a phone call from Ashley, and she's like, hey, guess what? It's like, what? She's in the hotel too, just in the room. She's like, I forgot the tickets in the car. So I kind of have to undress everything, run downstairs, to the hotel lobby and be like, "Hi, do you know where you park?" Because we valeted the car. It's like, "Do you know where you park our car?" And they were like, "Yeah, it's underneath Madison Square Garden." I was like, "Oh, like 2 blocks down." And they're like, "Yeah." So like I'm running 5 o'clock in the morning to get her tickets because she's sitting in the grandstand, which is like an area that you have to have a ticket for. And so I convinced the guy to take me to the car, let me get my tickets, bring them to Ashley. And then we finally get down the road. I get the butter costume on. We get down there, and the parade starts. Let's have a parade. I decide to pick one side of the street. Now, if you know anything about New York City, your streets are running one way, your avenues are running the other way. And so we finally get to Columbus Circle. Roker's doing his stand-up bit. He calls me over because I'm dressed like a stick of butter. He has some lines that he wants to drop, and so he, he's like, "I hate to butter you up, but you got to keep on going." Well, I should have probably just kept on going, but I was like, I gotta say something. I can't just let him pull one over on me.
Of
So I
course.
jumped into his live shot, and I'm like, "Happy Butter Thanksgiving." And then I just keep on going. Don't think nothing about it. Well, we get down 6th Avenue, and on 6th Avenue, the avenues are running north and south, the streets are running east and west. Well, they have set up viewing areas of about 15 yards in those streets because there's so many people. Not everybody can pack onto the avenue. Well, I was seeing kids that were in that in the streets, and I'm like, if those parents they woke up 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, they got their kids dressed, they want to see something more than just a bunch of people running by. And so I was jetting off into the streets, giving as many high fives as I could, which naturally put me behind my group. Not supposed to get behind the group, but so as I'm running, I run into Al Roker again. No idea that he's live in that moment. What are the chances? It's a 2 hour parade. What are the chances that he's live? Because there's so much stuff they can show. And I run up into his thing and I yell at it. It's like, "We're here to butter you up," because he had just said, we're not here to butter you up. I'm like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna butter you up. We're gonna butter your ham and turkey and everything else." And I just keep going. I don't think anything about it. I make the turn. Ashley jumps out of the grandstand. She's standing in the street waving. She's like, "Donnie, what did you do?" And I was like, "You're going to have to be very specific. I've done a lot of things in my life." That intro about being the adventurer, we could fill in the blank on Donnie, what did you do, with a lot of things.
Fair
And
enough.
and so we get through with the parade. I grab my phone. We blew up Twitter and Instagram and all that fun stuff. And so yeah, it went viral, and it was just such a fun moment. And it was in that time there was so many other things going on in life for so many people. There was a lot of things going on in the world, and in just every other area that was very serious. And so to kind of have a moment of laughter and a moment of brevity, it just kind of, I think that was part of the reason why that it took off like it did, because it wasn't
Sure.
serious. It wasn't just over your head. It was just fun, and people were
Sure.
looking for something fun. And I think that's why it went viral like it did.
I love that. So be honest with me, when you woke up that morning, knew you were going to be in the parade, you knew that there was a chance that there were going to be television cameras. Was there any part of you that said, if I get the chance, I'm not going to let it pass me by? Did you have any intention of trying to become a viral sensation, or is it something that just kind of happened?
No, no, not at all. I mean, there's hundreds of people in the parade. So what are the chances? I wasn't looking for it. It just kind of happened. Um, I feel like I'm back into the greatest moments in my life more than I intentionally look for it. So it's kind of like I've got like a thought, you know what, don't look for it, just see where life takes you. But on a spiritual sense, if you don't mind me going a little bit
No,
spiritual here,
absolutely. Come on.
in a spiritual sense, I mean, I wake up every morning and my prayer is simply, Spirit, lead me. God, allow your spirit to literally guide my steps. You guide my steps. You let my steps land where you want them to lead. Put me in front of the right person today. Give me the words to say. And And that is how I live my life. And one thing this 1,300-mile journey to New York has taught me is that, yeah, I could have great plans, but at the end of the day, I really have to just trust the leading of God's Spirit. And that is the thing that really makes the difference, is
Sure.
whenever you can kind of learn how to walk in it. It's not easy and it's not simple, but man, oh man, it can open up doors that, you could never do, because this is New York. Everybody wants to be seen in New York. Everybody
Sure.
wants to, and I don't kind of look at it as, oh, well, I want to be seen. I look at it as, all right, God, what can I do for you to be seen today?
Sure.
And that has been the ultimate goal. And he has really opened up some doors, and it's been a fun process.
Well, tell us a little bit about that, because the whole Butterman idea or persona didn't die on Thanksgiving Day 2019. It was really just the beginning of what has been an incredible journey, ultimately into the book, which we'll get to here in just a second. But talk about some of the other things that have happened just as a result of that crazy experience.
Yeah. Yeah. You can kind of look at this and say, oh, well, it was a cool one-time thing. And so it just kind of falls off. I didn't know what else was going to happen. I didn't know, because you can't put lightning in a bottle twice. I get
Sure.
that. And so it's like, I really didn't know. And then halfway through the year, I get a call from Macy's and like, hey, it's going to be different this year. The parade's going to be different, but we still want Butterman to be back in 2020. And it's like, all right, we can do it again. I'm all in. And so having the opportunity to do it again, and then being able to meet some great people. I've met some wonderful people at Macy's, and still have some wonderful connections there, and some friendships, really.
Sure.
And NBC, I'm still great friends with some people at NBC. Actually, one of the producers at NBC wrote a piece for the book, and I was so thankful for him to do that. He's a great friend of mine. And so I would say that one of the biggest things that's happened is just built some wonderful relationships with some awesome people that I would have never got to meet without this moment.
Sure.
And I think everything kind of goes back to relationships with that. And
Yeah.
and and then with the book, the you never let a good opportunity go to waste. And I was like, look, I've got this one opportunity. I believe it was Benjamin Franklin that said once, he said, write something worth reading or do something worth writing. And
Fair
it's like,
enough.
I may not ever write anything worth reading, but I'm going to do something worth writing. And so this was kind of like the moment.
Man, I love that, because I know that not only were you just had that exposure on national television there at the parade, it also led to you going on the Today Show just, I think, the very next week. It's led to a couple other just neat appearances, but has also put you in position to really share the gospel in places that we might not otherwise be able to easily get into. And so I know, just in talking to you off, kind of just in our friendship, that you've even said some of those at NBC, they know you as pastor. They call you pastor, that you've been able to build those relationships. And so that whole idea of being spirit led, yes, it's turned into just a novel, kind of funny, joyful experience. Yes, it turned into an exciting book project, but also it's just opened some incredible doors where otherwise, who knows if we ever would have had an opportunity to expose Christ, to expose the love of God in the way that you have to those certain people.
Yeah, whenever I was on the phone with the producer, like I said, he has become one of my dearest friends to my heart. And I asked him, I said, now, whenever this was right before the Today Show, and I asked him, I said, now, I'm a pastor. How much of that do you want me to expose, or do you just want me to like fully embrace this whole Butterman thing and whatever? He goes, be you. And that was his response. He said, you're a pastor. That's what you do. That's who you are. And he said, don't be ashamed of it. Embrace it. And so with him just giving me that permission
Sure.
to do it, it changed everything in my mindset. And because whenever you are spirit led, and I know I keep going back to that, but probably the scripture that has defined the last 4 or 5 years of my life is, it's not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord. whenever you're spirit led, you are going to show the fruit of the Spirit in your life. Your life is going to be defined by love and joy and peace. And those are things that are going to just overflow out of you. And so that has been my prayer through this whole thing is, God, let people see the fruit of your Spirit. And whenever they look at those things, because they are so rare in our world,
Sure.
we don't live in a world that's seeking to love and peace and forgiveness and joy. And so every day we have to make an intentional effort. God, what you've put in us, let us bear fruit in those areas. And so really just them giving me that permission changed everything in my entire mindset on the whole entire project and all of the relationships going into them.
I love it. I love it. Well, we're here to talk about the book. So let's jump into the book, which again was just another neat thing that came out of this random encounter that you had during that parade 2 years ago. So diving straight in, you've already talked about the experience. This is your first book. I don't think it'll be your last book, but it is your first book to have written. I know you kind of have talked about just always dreaming about writing a book. I don't know if you expected to have your face in a butter costume on the cover of it whenever you dreamed about that. But incidentally enough, the subtitle of this book is From Dream to Reality. It's really a book about dreams. In this book, you kind of seek to answer questions like, can big dreams really become reality? Do people just stumble into these dreams, or is there something that we can do to nudge them along? Can we help them happen? What can we do to almost take a scientific approach at times to seeing the fulfillment of not just good dreams, but also of God dreams? So there's a lot of meat in this book, but kind of the foundational principle that you center this entire book on is this idea of the growth cycle of a dream. So why don't you just take a moment, and obviously don't give everything away, because we do want people to buy the book. And there is a link here, goodbutterbest.com, for them to go and find more information, to watch some videos if they haven't seen you in that parade, and to find a little bit more out about you. But why don't you tell us kind of that process of the growth cycle of the dream? What is that, and why is that foundational to what you think about dreams?
Really, the growth cycle of the dream is something that I kind of stumbled on in retrospect. Sometimes I think the greatest revelations are those that we find in retrospect. And so I really began to go, okay, what is a dream? I'm a massive dreamer. I love to dream about things. I love to dream about the future. The idea of taking something that has never existed and making it come to pass is just so much fun to me. And it's like, okay, so how do we take something that is a dream? Now, whenever we say dream, we often think of like this big, glorious cloud-like thing floating in the atmosphere. And it's like, we got to get to their dreams. Really, a dream is a thought. It is a thought that sticks.
Okay.
And it's like, we all have thoughts, and I write a lot about thoughts in the book. It's just a thought that actually sticks, and it's a thought that you believe in enough to make a decision on it. What are you thinking right now that you want to do? Make a decision. And then once you make a decision to pursue it, you believe in it. You believe in it so strongly that it really doesn't matter what anybody else says or does or thinks. It's a thought in your heart that has gone from really a thought to a conviction. It's like, I have to pursue this. I have to do this. And whenever you have that deep-seated belief, then you have to act upon it. And whenever you begin to act upon it and it becomes an action, then all of a sudden it's your reality. You begin to live in a new reality. And in one part of the book, I use our story of me and my wife going to New York. New York didn't just happen. It was over a 10-year process. I had the dream back in 2008 to go to New York, and I actually put a copy of my journal in the book, saying like, today it's 2008. But I'm writing this letter for 2018. And in 2018, I'm going to be living in New York. I'm going to be married. I'm going to have, I think it's like 2 kids and all of this kind of stuff. And I'm going to be pastored in New York. I remember, I think you called me actually, Caleb, and whenever y'all were doing the proofreading, and you're like, is this right? Is this right? Did you accidentally put 2008 instead of 2018.
You're right. I thought we had the wrong date altogether. This was a mistake. And then I'm like, wait a second. This actually became my favorite part of the book.
Yeah. And it was actually an assignment that I had to do in college. Where are you going to be in 10 years? And I was like, I'm going to be pastoring in New York. That's what I want. And it was a thought that just, it became it became my personal belief that if I didn't do this, I would be completely, and I'd be completely out of the will of God if I didn't do it.
Sure.
That's how deeply seated that that belief was for me.
Sure.
And so the growth cycle of the dream really hits home. It takes you from a thought to a reality, from an idea of what can be to the it can't just be an idea anymore. It has to actually be a reality, and we have to make this happen. And
Sure.
so that's really what I talk about whenever I talk about the growth cycle of a dream.
Very good. One of my favorite things about this book is you share so many personal stories, and you do talk about yours and Ashley's journey. Um, Sharing just the details of when you were a youth pastor in Wisner, Louisiana, and then going to Thibodaux, and just
Yeah.
following that track all the way to eventually ending up in Westchester, New York. Now, in 2008, you wrote that down in your journal, and that's such a neat thing. I believe it begins chapter 3 or chapter 4, but you have that journal there, and then by 2018, it's check, 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 check. But there was a 10-year process where what you says is, or what you say by your own admission in your mind, if I didn't fulfill this, I'd be out of the will of God. I have this God-given dream, yet it takes 10 years for you to get from the point where you felt like you were given the dream to where the dream was actually in fulfillment. I honestly, just again, taking a biblical turn here, but it really reminds you a lot of the story of Joseph, the dreamer, and the period of time that it took for the fulfillment of those dreams. My question, though, and part of that growth cycle of the dream concept, what are some things that you did in those 10 years to not let the dream die, to fight against discouragement that at times had to creep in, saying, this is what I should be doing, this is what I believe I'm called to do, yet the timing wasn't there? So talk to us a little bit about what it is in that in-between season, that
Yeah.
in-between space between dream and reality.
I was in Wisner, and and I had spread my thought to multiple people about New York. And I got a handwritten letter from Carlton Coon. And in that letter, he knew my passion for New York, but he also, because of where he was from, he knew about Wisner as well. And he just reminded me that people are people wherever you're at, and you can learn something from them.
Okay.
And I remember in that moment saying, I'm going to throw everything that I have into being great at Wisner. I want to have the greatest youth group at Wisner. Um, and because I believe that even though I knew that New York was out there, I needed to live in a Wisner state of mind.
Sure.
And I had some stuff to learn right there. And so I became the greatest student that Wisner could ever teach.
Sure.
And then whenever I went to Thibodaux, it was the same thing. I was going to be the greatest student that Thibodaux ever had. I was going to soak up, and I was going to learn everything that I could. Now, in the back of my mind, yes, I kept that alive. I kept the New York dream alive. And part of the ways that I did that was very practical. Number one, I stayed in contact with every person from New York that I could. I kept those connections close. And then number two, we financially supported Westchester Church, as a matter of fact, for 10 years.
Very
So
cool.
every month, whenever you see money roll out of your bank account towards something, you're going to remember that in your mind. It is going to stay fresh. And I would take trips by myself to New York. I think I took 2 by myself, just to not forget the passion that I felt toward it, and
Sure.
not forget that there's 8 million people here that need Jesus.
Sure.
And I cannot let that exit my mind. And so those were some of the things that I did. I intentionally stayed connected. And 10 years, it feels like the snap of a finger.
Sure.
because whenever you stay connected, you keep your emotions connected, and you keep your wallet connected, and you keep the things that matter the most connected to you, um, you can endure a decade.
Yeah, so good. So many good nuggets there about growing where you're planted, growing in this
Yeah.
season and not living beyond the season, dreaming and staying connected. I even love that. You probably didn't know that you were investing in your actual future, but you
No.
might have just been sowing seed in New York saying, I'm going to be there one day. Yet lo and behold, it happened to be the same church that you would pastor one day. How
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
How incredible.
We thought we were going to go start a church in Queens.
Okay.
We thought we were going to start a church in Queens. That's what we thought we were going to end up doing. We had done all of the paperwork, and we had taken all the right steps. And then a few months before we were going to start deputizing toward that goal, the church in Westchester, which is the one that we had supported for all those years, invited us to come be their pastor.
Wow.
And it was a God domino effect, because everything had to happen in that timing.
Right.
If it did not happen in that timing, we would have been caught up in the pandemic. We would have been moving right at the beginning of the pandemic into the city.
Sure.
The Macy's thing would have never happened. We would not have started a daughter work in Manhattan whenever we did. And so all of this is just God's perfect timing. And that's why I kind of go back to just being spirit led. Allow the dream that God places in your mind to live there, and don't, but also understand whenever God says to do something, know his voice enough to be able to act upon it.
Yeah, be ready to walk through the door. This is a perfect tie into ministry. And for many who will watch this, they or are watching right now, no doubt they probably are engaged in some aspect of ministry, in a local church somewhere, teaching a Bible study, something along those lines. In the book, you talk about this concept of a dream beyond self. And I think that is just one of the standout things that in my mind is worth the price of the book, to read what you have to say about this idea of a dream beyond self. Give us just a quick snapshot of what you mean when you use that phrase.
Yeah, a dream beyond self. Whenever I talk about that, many times we can get consumed with ourselves, um, and what do I want? What are my needs? And we can kind of become self-consumed. But if you look at some of the greatest dreamers that have ever lived, they had a dream that it really didn't matter whether they were there or not. In the book, I use three examples. I use Walt Disney World, Walt Disney. Walt Disney, I love Walt Disney simply because he's such a master storyteller.
Sure.
He used his storytelling ability to build one of the greatest empires the world has ever seen. But with Walt Disney, he had this idea of the Florida Project. I'm sure that many people who are watching right now, you have been to Walt Disney World, um, and you have ridden a small world after all, and you've done Magic Kingdom and Epcot and Hollywood Studios and all of that fun stuff. And today, millions of people flock to Disney World every year. But you did something that Walt Disney never did. He never saw the completion of Walt Disney World,
Sure.
because he actually died before it was ever completed. But there was a group of people around him that said this project has to be completed whether Walt Disney's here or not, because that is a dream beyond self. Or you look at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He had a dream for his four children to be able to, or his children to be able to walk hands in hands with kids of different races. That was his dream. He said, I have a dream. And then, in March of 1968, he participated in this mass march to support striking African-American sanitation workers in Memphis. It ended in violence. The next month, he returned to Memphis to try it again. And as he's standing there in his motel, an assassin's bullet takes his life. But yet the dream did not die with him. It lived way beyond him. And so we have to ask ourselves, what dream has God placed in our hearts, that it has to be bigger than us? My great grandparent, my great grandparents actually helped start the church where I received the Holy Spirit.
Hmm.
And they had a dream to have a church on their side of the river because there was no church there. And that was a dream that lived beyond them.
Sure.
And so whenever we take inventory with our life, we can just ask the question, what am I doing that is going to outlive me? And that's what I mean by a dream beyond self.
Very good. Very good. For those who might just be tuning in, we're talking to author Donny Willis, Pastor Donny Willis, about his newest book, Good, Butter, Best, From Dream to Reality. If you haven't seen this yet, it's available at pentecostalpublishing.com, also on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, and he's even got the audio book available on Audible as well. And so if you haven't had a chance to pick up this copy, it's well worth the read. Donny, a few other questions just before we wrap up this evening. So no doubt those who are watching, and out of those who may watch this just after the fact that it was live, there's going to be somebody who, when you talk about dreams, their natural reaction may be negative. Maybe it's because they had a dream that at one point in time they felt very passionate about, but circumstances or the way that life went, whatever caused it, they're not living in the full potential of that dream that they had at that one point in time. What is some advice maybe that you could give to a dreamer who is tempted to give up on their dream?
It doesn't matter how or where you start. It matters how or where you finish. The greatest disservice to yourself is not to finish strong. Having a desire in your life to see your business grow or your abilities increase, your dreams power packed with passion is only a beginning, but that desire is not enough. You have to finish faithfully and you have to finish strong. Um, you know, uh, in researching the book, I began to come across some incredible stories. And one of my favorite stories was from the 1968 Summer Olympic Games in Mexico City. There was an Ethiopian runner who won the marathon, but as the sun went down, people began to gather and they began to exit the stadium. And around 7 o'clock that evening, over an hour after he had won, something very unusual happened. Those sitting near the entrance heard the sirens and they heard the police whistles, and all eyes turned to the gate. And entered the stadium was the last runner in that thing. He was grimacing with every step. They looked closer and they saw that his leg was bloodied and it was bandaged. And they had learned later that during the race he had cramped up due to the high altitude in the city. You see, he was from Tanzania, and he had never trained in an altitude like that in his home country. The cramping caused a terrible fall, dislocated, wounded his knee, and whenever he finally crossed the finish line, the cheer arose from the spectators, and a television interviewer asked him, "Why did you keep going?" And this was his response: "My country did not send me 7,000 miles to start a race. They sent me 7,000 miles to finish it." And I believe that that is one of the greatest things we can do in our lives. Okay, so it hasn't gone exactly like you thought. Okay, it's not as rosy and as wonderful as you thought it was going to be. But what you have is right now and today, and you can take inventory. Okay, what do I have right now? Where am I at right now? And what can I do with what I have to make something of the rest of my life? Because Job paints this picture. He says things like, "Our days are swifter than the weaver's shuttle," or "Our days on earth are but a shadow." And we have such a short period of time. We our life is such a journey. And Oliver Wendell Holmes, I believe, said it best. He said, "Many people die with their music still in them." And so I would say, find what you do have. Don't worry about the past. Find what you have right now and say, what can I do with it to make a difference in my world? And those are the best. That's the
Very, very good.
best.
Very good. Something about just that faithfulness, that
Yeah.
just staying faithful and faithful to the dream, faithful to the mission. Very, very good. One last question for you, Donnie, before we kind of close this, let you give some final remarks. But another thing that shortly after you had that experience in 2019, the Butterman thing blew up. You had gone on the Today Show. I believe you published a blog, and you kind of listed maybe 3 things that you had learned just through that experience. All 3 of them were good, but there was one that immediately stuck out to me, and I was glad that it made it into the book. The statement that you make is to treat life's big moments like a hot potato. I'm going to be honest with you, I probably had not heard the term hot potato for a few years, considering I didn't have kids at that point in time in my life. And it had been a little while since I had played hot potato with anybody, but that was the comparison that you made and something that you learned through that process. Just as you kind of close this out and wrap us up tonight, talk to us about what you mean when you say treat those big life moments like a hot potato.
Absolutely. We're all going to have moments in our life. Some are going to be positive and some are going to be negative. Some of the moments are just, man, I just want to hold on to this. Then there'll be some moments where it's like, man, I have to hold on to this. Or like, yes, the butter thing was a great moment and it was exciting, but I can't hold on to that forever. There's going to be a point where it runs its course, it's over, it's done, and I can't try to resurrect it. It has to end and got to move on. And, negative moments in your life, you may have received a diagnosis from a doctor and it's like, oh no, what am I going to do with this? I have to hold on to this. But there has to kind of be a point where you say, you know what? I have to move on with my life. And so whenever I think about that, I think about a sign that you will see at LaGuardia Airport, which is much nicer, by the way, if anybody cares. But there's a sign that says parking for loading and unloading only. Parking for unloading and only. It seems that every time we get settled on a new plateau at life and you just begin to enjoy a little bit of success, you need to look around for that sign because it's around there somewhere. Hey, you can park here just long enough to unload something, load some things, and get on the road. Did I sound like a New Yorker whenever I said all that?
I love it. You're starting to fit in. Louisiana is slowly fading away as New York is beginning to take its place.
I think about George Washington. They wanted to make him a king. They're like, hey, King George. And he said no. He said, absolutely not. Get that thought out of your head. The king across the pond, he said that if Washington voluntarily gave up power, then he would truly be the greatest man on earth. Oliver Cromwell didn't do it. Napoleon wouldn't do it, but Washington did. He could have had a kingdom for the asking, but he wasn't interested in it. He held on to the moment, and then he let it go. He moved on. It was time to reload because life is really for loading and unloading only.
Sure.
No parking. Don't hold on to anything in life any longer than you would a hot potato.
I love it. I love it. So many good nuggets you've shared. And the cool thing that I know that others will come to find out is that's just the beginning. Many topics tonight that you've covered that are definitely worth the price of this book. As you dive further into that growth cycle of a dream, you talk even more expanded about some of the things that we've talked about. And there's plenty of other nuggets that are tucked away in this book. Kind of as we wrap this up, is there any final thoughts maybe that you would like to share with those who are watching, just related to dreams, related to where they may be at in life and how they can help turn their dreams into a reality?
Sure. So around 400 years ago, Godspeed was one of the 3 ships owned by the English Virginia Company that brought settlers to Jamestown, the first permanent English settlement in North America. The captain wrote in his diary, "She is thy ruler of thy seas, with her mighty velocity, more veloce than the wind, and mightier than the rocket. She is my dear Godspeed." So, to everybody out there who's watching and who didn't mind my interpretation of that poem there, I would say to you that, may your dreams rule the seas of your life with a mighty force, and may they churn within you mightier than a rocket, and allow a destiny and a desire to burn within your heart. Live life to everything you got. Maintain your integrity in the process, and just enjoy life. Enjoy life That's probably one of the biggest things that the last 4 years has taught me living in New York. It's really, life's not as serious as we make it out to be. And just enjoy it. Drop things, pick things up, enjoy the people around you, and well, Godspeed.
I love it. What a great word, especially for the season that we're living in with everything that's going on around our world. To those of you who have joined us live tonight, to those who have taken time to watch this maybe after the live filming of it, I want to say thank you. Thank you for sharing your evening with us and sharing about 40 minutes of your time with us. I know that you have without a doubt been blessed by Donny, and that's without even reading the book. So I would encourage you to get your hands on his new book, Good, Better, Best, From Dream to Reality. If you're interested, you can find your copy at pentecostalpublishing.com. It's also available on Amazon, both in printed and ebook form, on Audible in audiobook, which is very neat. Donny actually reads this book himself, which is an added flavor that we don't always get with every book that goes to audiobook fashion, but it's definitely an enjoyable listen. You can also find the digital versions on iBooks, find them on barnesandnoble.com. But you will be blessed by this book, as I'm sure you have been tonight. Donny, thank you, sir, for your time tonight. Thank you for enriching the book. It is a message worth sharing. We appreciate your passion and are grateful for what God is doing there in Westchester and in Westchester Church. So thank you tonight. Everybody who's watching, have a great evening. And we say God bless, and we hope to talk to you soon.